Hi, my name's Brian English, Wappler forum name Hyperbytes, and in this module we're going to look at how to send a user a security code to validate a sign up, similar way that you do on the Wappler.io website. So we're going to incorporate this into the registration process. We're going to change the registration process a little bit in terms of, at the moment, if you remember, within our registration API, we create the user and we give them a role automatically. What I want to do is I want to create the user but not actually authorize them to do anything on the site until such time as they have verified their membership, in other words their email address, and when they verify that email address then they will be authorized to use the site. It does add a fair bit more extra work, because not only do you need to do that, what happens if the person perhaps doesn't receive the email, or they leave it too long if you set the time limit, etc. So we not only need to be able to send them that code at the time of registration, they're also going to need to be able to request a new code as well if required. And then for those registrations which are not confirmed within a length of time, we can choose what length of time that is. We can actually use the scheduler that we have here to just check out the registration file, and for anybody who has not confirmed their registration, can we simply delete them out after 7 days or whatever. So as we said, the first thing that's going to happen is we're not going to give somebody a role on registration. We're going to do that later stage. So we're just simply going to remove that completely from our API action. What we need to do now instead is, at the end of this, we need to send a code to the user. So the first thing that we're actually going to have to do is to set up the ability to send emails. So if we go back into globals, you'll see the global parameters we have is our database connections we've already set up, our security provider we also set up. We're now going to create a global mailer setup. So I want to call that SMTP, simply because we'll be using Simple Mail Transfer Protocol based authorization. You see we have a server default, so you can actually just have that using the server's default email client. I prefer to use SMTP primarily because the servers that I use have the ability to be able to add security keys, etc. in with your emails. So my host is smtp.stackmail.com. When I learned to spell. Outgoing mail for this particular server goes out on port 465. We've got to give it a username. And I'm going to use a no reply box. So it's no reply at, and ultimately I will be uploading this to visitnorthtyne.co.uk, which is the address of the site, and I will be dealing with production servers soon. And then we need to give it the password, my secret password. And we then just save that. We don't need to worry about a pickup directory specifically. Now obviously that's not really the password that I'm using. I forgot to mention we should click SSL for my servers as well. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take that off the screen. I'm actually going to put the correct password in off screen because it doesn't get blanked out by Wappler. I'm going to save that so that we've got the mailer saved, and I'm just going to click it off it and close it so you can't actually see those real live settings. So there we are, I'm back now. We've got SMTP up here. I'm not going to show you the settings for obvious reasons. So what we need to do now is to be able to send a unique code to your user. And I'm going to use a bit of a convoluted system of creating that code, but it's an incredibly flexible method. What we're going to do is, it could be a numeric code. We might want numbers and letters. We might even want special characters in there. So I'm going to create a generic routine that will allow you to do exactly that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a action, and I'm going to create a set value stage. I'm going to call that salt code. This will be the basis for what we'll be generating. And what we're going to do is we're going to give that the values that are acceptable within that code. So if we're going to do numeric only, we'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Important, they are separated with commas. If we also wanted to be able to add some characters in, there's nothing to stop you adding some characters in. And even if you wanted maybe a special code. So all we've done there at this point is create a simple string, comma separated values, and that is a text string. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to split that array, that string into an array. So what we'll end up in this case is we'll end up with a 13 element array, each element containing one of the values that we've got there. How do we do that? Well, we're going to first of all create a new stage. You could do this all in one stage, but I'd like to do it this way just so you can see what's happening. And we're going to call this code array. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that comma separated list that we have there, and we're going to split that based on the commas, and that will create that, in this case, 13-digit array, each element holding a separate value. Now we need to pick some characters from that. So before we do that, and then we're going to create a new value, and what we're going to do is we're going to randomize that code array. So call that random array for want of a better name. But this stage, you'll see under here global name. I'm also going to give that a global name. So what's the difference, you might ask? Well, fairly straightforward really. The name is a straightforward variable, and that variable is visible to every other action within that same namespace. So what's a namespace? If you can imagine, if you were to take our system here, if every variable in the system was public, and we used x in 2 different functions, then wouldn't it be chaos if changing x in function A also change the value of x in function B? That would be completely crazy. So JavaScript, along with most of the high-level languages, will basically define a variable as private to that particular section of code, unless we tell it to be available outside of that. And in this case, rather than being functions and such like as I've expressed, it's almost easy to say, look at your actions. If your action is in line with those other actions, then it will be in the same namespace. But if it's in an indented position, then it will be in a different namespace. So that if we were to pick random array in here, then that would not be the same as random array in here, because they're in different namespaces. Think of it, different lines. If we give them a global name, as we've done there, that means that referring to the global name it will be the same regardless of where we access that variable from. So our random array, which we create a global version of, a global within this server action, I might add, not the entire system. What we're going to do is we're going to take that code array that we have, which is at the moment ordered in the order that we have here, and we're going to randomize it. So we go to collections, randomize. So now we have still 13 element array. However, the order of those elements has now been completely randomized, so that we can then just say, right, okay, we'll pick the first 4, we'll pick the first 6, and we'll use those values as a security code. I'll just go back to our original salt here. In this case, there will only be 1, 1 or 1, 2 or 1, 3 or 1, 4, etc. in the resultant code, because they can only appear once within that array. If you want to allow duplicates, then all we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate it. So now we can have any of those values can actually appear twice within that security code. You could actually make it 3 or 4. And to be honest, the more you do that, the more options that you create, the more different combinations that you create. So that code will become more complex. And that's why I like to do it this way, because you have totally flexibility on how this code is created. So at the moment we take this string, we explode it into an array, we completely randomize the array, and now what we've got to do is just to build a code based on that. So I'm just going to first of all create yet another value, and we're going to call that, we'll just call it my code. Global name as well. I tend to just, with any globals, I tend to just prefix the name with G under bar, and then I know which global refers to which set value stage. In a moment, that's going to have no value at all. That's going to be a blank variable. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a repeat. So what we're going to say is we're going to iterate through that random array X number of times, and each time we're going to take the appropriate element within that randomized array and add it to the code. So our expression is random array. No, it's not, my apologies. The expression will be the number of digits that we want in that code. So if we want a 6-digit code, repeat 6 times, and when they're there, we're going to add an action, and what we're going to do is we're going to redefine the my code global version. So we're going to say set value. We're going to take the value of my code, but you have to do this manually. Make sure we refer to the global version of it, but also we need to add the offset within that randomized array. So we're going to now click on the pop-up. We're going to go operation. Operation is plus, and then the value we're going to use is code array. And then we need to manually now add that $index value. So that $index will be the offset within the array that we have. And if we look at the code there, so we're taking, each time we go through that loop, that's 6 times, we're taking the value of my code, and then we're adding the appropriate value from the random array, and that's going to start at 0 as always, as JavaScript does. So we're going to say we want characters 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, added together into a string, and that will generate the code that we want. And then we need to be able to output that value as well. Sorry, we need to actually give that sorry, my apologies. We need to just tell it which variable we're acting on there. Oh, come on. Okay, so just to recap on that, we've got a long comma separated list. We've split that into an array. We've randomized that array. We've initialized the value as effectively null. We repeat through 6 times, and what we've done is we added the first 6 digits of that code to the global value of my code, and provided we have that output, then what we should have at the end is that the code with 6 digits in this case, will be output to our server action. So now we need to first of all store that code in our database for future reference, and we need to send that to the user so they can go through the validation process. So the first thing that we need to do is to actually make provision within the users table, and that provision we're going to make for we'll call it auth code, an authorization code. Again, I'm going to leave that as a varchar, and I'm limit 255 purely because we created that algorithm. That code could be any length very easily. So the code is going to be stored in there, and while we're busy, when the person validates their account, we're going to give them, or we're going to store the date and time that that account was validated. And we're going to leave this default free here because we're going to manually update that when we go through the validation process. So I'm going to hit apply those database changes. We're going to commit that change. Now we're going to add a new action immediately following the generation of the code, and that's going to be database update. So I don't think we've covered updates yet, but the update, basically what we're saying is we need to update the user table. We want to update the authorization code because we need to put that authorization code into our database, and that authorization code, as we know, is currently held in my code. We'll globalize it just to be double sure, and the condition is going to be where the email matches. Actually, no, we don't need to do that, do we? Our user ID is equal to the ID allocated with that database insert where we inserted that user's details. So we can go into the server action, we'll find that insert action, and it's actually the identity that was allocated then. So what that does is that will update the auth code field that we've just created within our table with the code for that particular user, so that we can use that reference to check the authorization code that's been sent. Then lastly, we need to send an email. So let's add another action. Let's go into our mailer here and click on send mail. Our subject will be your authorization code. We're going to be sending it from website. Obviously, if we in production, you would give the name of the website there. Let's put our no reply mailbox detail in here, and the recipient will be, well, the person that signed up. So what we can do is actually post first name, put in a space, last name, select that, and we can send it to obviously the email that they've registered with. And what we need to do is tell them their authorization code. So we're just going to say your authorization code is, pop a colon in there, and then we're going to tag that code on to the end of here. And that's our code there. And again, don't actually need to do this, just a habit that I've gone into. Any doubt, always use a global form. So the person will then receive an email addressed to them, first name, last name, on that email address from no reply at Visit North Tyne to say your authorization code is, and that will say what the authorization code is. So that's all that we need to do at this stage. We now just need to check that routine works correctly, make sure that the individual gets that email that they should, and then after that we can move on to validation of the code. So let's go into register. Actually, before I go any further, I'm just going to get rid of any test data that we built up in here. So we're starting with a clean slate. Same with roles. Get our data from there, fetch data, get rid of them, and delete. So we've got no data in at all there now. So let's hit register. Put some details in. Give us an email address. There we are, click the registration. That's taken us to the home page as we would expect, but the big question now is, has it sent us the appropriate email? So I'm just opening up my email on another page here, another screen I should say. And there's our message that we received. There's our authorization code that's been sent, and we can then input that into our authorization module, which we'll be looking at next. So thanks for following me on this module, and we'll next look at the way of authorization of that code and giving that user some authority on the website. So I hope to see you soon.